The Village Court, a short story by Habib Mohana. Ikram eked out a living hawking low-cost cosmetics, imitation jewellery, flimsy toys and sticky toffees in the villages scattered across the Daman plains. From dawn till dusk, he would move from one village to the next on his weathered Sorab bicycle, its frame groaning beneath the weight of the wares. So heavily was it laden that only its saddle and pedals remained visible, the rest swallowed beneath a teetering, precarious load. Yet, through years of practice, he had learned to guide this unwieldy contraption with quiet mastery along narrow streets and rutted tracks. He was a familiar sight in Kot Lalu, a small, dust-blown village where winters were harsh and summers punishing. With his bicycle at his side, Ikram would lift his rusty bugle to his lips upon entering the village. Its cracked, brassy notes drifted through the alleys, startling dogs from their naps and sending chickens flapping through the courtyards. At the sound, curtains twitched and doors creaked open. Soon, women and children spilled into the lane, gathering around him as if summoned by an old spell. The almond-coloured, 40-year-old Ikram was a cheerful, talkative sort, his laughter quick and unforced. On his daily rounds, he paused at street corners trading gossip and news with his female customers, cracking easy jokes and asking how their family members were doing. Those short on cash paid him in eggs, wheat or clarified butter. For those with nothing to barter, he kept a small notebook in his pocket, running tabs in a neat slanted hand. When thirsty, he would ask plainly for water. When hungry, for a scrap of bread. And without fail, a cool tumbler of buttermilk or a warm flatbread was pressed into his hands, offered with a smile, the kind that spoke of years of easy familiarity. Hardly ever did the village men buy anything from the hawker. They looked upon him with open disdain. In their estimation, he was a creature of cunning, preying on the imagination of unsuspecting women and enticing them to part with a few coins for his low-grade trinkets. Ikram, in their eyes, was effeminate and weak for shunning what they deemed honest, masculine work such as farming, herding or woodcutting. Some even shooed him away from their doors, as if he were a stray dog, to keep their women and children from the temptation of his alleged substandard goods. Yet, while the men scorned him, the women welcomed him warmly. To them, he was a vital link to modern fashions and distant news, slipping beauty tips and snippets of health advice into his cheerful banter. Having once lived in Karachi, he would paint vivid pictures of towering buildings, dazzling electric lights that turned night into day, and stylish ladies in heels threading their way through crowded bazaars. The women would lean closer, their eyes wide with wonder, as if each word carried them out of their sun-baked courtyards and into that shimmering, distant world. To the illiterate housewives, he was more than a hawker. He was both an entertainer and an educator, their only window onto the world beyond the village lanes. Ikram's arrival in the village was always eagerly awaited, especially in the days leading up to Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, when the air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Though a villager himself, the hawker carried an air of distinction that set him apart from the dust-grimed men of the fields. His clothes were neater, finely tailored. His eyes, gleaming and intelligent, were delicately rimmed with kohl. His jet-black hair, slicked back with amla oil, glimmered like polished obsidian, recalling the dashing style of Lollywood heroes. His clothes carried the subtle, musky fragrance of attar. Though he was conscious of his short stature, God had blessed him with a long, aristocratic nose that lent his face an unexpected dignity. He had been married for 10 years and was the father of 4 children, yet time had treated him kindly, leaving him with a remarkably youthful countenance. In the hushed corners of Kot Lalu, a different story circulated. As the women gathered at the well or collected firewood from the fields, they often clucked their tongues at Hawker's alleged affair with the potter's wife, a mother of 3. Their voices were dipped to conspiratorial whispers, each swearing she had seen him linger at the woman's doorway far longer than propriety allowed. They would speak of his low, intimate laughter, and of his hand slipping trinkets and tins of powder into hers, sometimes freely, sometimes at prices so low they aroused suspicion. The midday sun of mid-June was beating down relentlessly on the village, its scorching gaze driving every soul beneath thatched roofs or into the cool shade of trees. Heat shimmered along the eerily quiet streets. After a fruitless, hours-long search for his lost donkey, a weary farmer stumbled into the graveyard, a sprawling, fenceless wasteland at the village's edge, where dry grass whispered in the hot breeze, and the occasional, languid drone of flies hung in the air. As the farmer's eyes swept over the desolate ground, a sudden glint caught his attention from within a dense clump of toothbrush trees. Dulled by fatigue, curiosity nevertheless stirred him forward. He pushed through the wild grasses, their dry blades crackling sharply underfoot. The glint resolved into a small, round mirror dangling from the handlebar of a bicycle, the hawker's distinctive Sorab bicycle, propped carelessly against a gnarled trunk as if abandoned in haste. Then came the low murmur of voices from within the dense foliage. Holding his breath, the famer crept closer, his own heart pounding in his ears. Gently, he parted the lacy branches that formed a hidden enclosure. In the cool, gloomy shade, he saw the hawker and the potter's wife, entwined in a desperate, compromising embrace. For a moment, the peeping Tom stood frozen, an unwitting witness to it all. The peeping Tom rushed breathless to the community centre, where his friends sat playing cards. In urgent, gasping whispers, he spilled the scandalous details of what he had witnessed in the cemetery. Charpoys creaked, cards fluttered to the ground, and within moments a band of 10 men stormed towards the cemetery. The lovers lay in each other's arms in the gloomy grove when the men burst in from all sides, parting the lacy branches as they advanced. Panic shot through the lovers as they scrambled to flee, but the intruders moved like a tightening net, closing off every escape. The hawker dropped to his knees, clutching at the hems of their curtains one by one, his frantic pleas echoing through the shady tunnel of toothbrush trees. The woman clutched her rumpled headscarf, touched the men's feet with it, sobs tearing out of her throat. But their faces showed no hint of mercy. The peeping Tom's slap rang out, sharp, sudden, and shattering across the hawker's ashen, trembling face. "Are you not ashamed? You call yourself a Muslim? Even a Kaffir wouldn't foul a graveyard like this. Have you no respect for the dead?" he thundered. "Blacken their faces with soot," the thick-set oil-maker bellowed, his chest heaving and veins bulging in his neck. The bulky wrestler smashed his fist into the hawker's nose with a sickening crunch. Blood spattered across his cheek as he staggered back, wailing in agony. "Parade them through the village on a donkey!" he shouted, and the crowd erupted in approval. "Drag them to the mullah! Let Sharia judge these sinners!" the dumpy little blacksmith yelled, spitting directly into Ikram's face, the edges of his playing cards jutting from his front pocket. The hawker's mistress collapsed helplessly onto the ground, her body writhing in the dust like a crushed insect. The men left her there but seized her lover, their fists raining down with ruthless force. Dragging him, broken, bloodied, and gasping, they set off toward the village community centre, the crowd surging behind them, voices clamouring for grim punishments. In no time, Kot Lalu hummed with scandalous news. Villagers from every lane poured into the community centre, a restless swarm of men bristling with outrage. The hawker sat roped to a charpoy leg, his hair matted with sweat and dust, his tears streaking his grimy face, saliva glistening at the corner of his mouth. With each new arrival came a fresh assault, a stinging slap to the face, a brutal kick to the ribs. A foul rain of spit fell upon him from all directions. Then a man elbowed his way forward. He carried a brass platter heaped with fresh, wet cow dung and upended it over the hawker's head. The pungent, choking stench unfurled in the scorching air as the crowd's roar of laughter swelled around him, a sound more terrible than any blow. "I've eaten filth. I've committed a terrible sin. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never repeat it. I'll never set foot in this village again," the hawker pleaded, his voice ragged and breaking, cutting through the heavy air. "You should have thought of that earlier," the village chief replied coldly. "Lust blinded you. This is a village of honourable people, not a brothel." His polished cane came down with a thunderous crack across the hawker's back, the sound splitting the tense silence before the next wave of abuse followed. The chief sent for the potter, but he was away on a week-long tour of distant villages, selling his earthen wares. Meanwhile, news of the scandal swept through the neighbouring villages like a storm. Farmers dropped their sickles, woodcutters their axes, and raced toward Kot Lalu on bicycles, camels and horses, eager to witness the spectacle. Soon, the community centre was swollen with men and boys, while children clambered onto rooftops and low walls, all eyes fixed on Ikram. Half a dozen iron griddles were brought to the scene. Some men scraped soot from the griddles with sticks and smeared the matte black powder across Ikram's face, transforming him into a grotesque figure from a morality play. From the crowd, laughter rose, long, scornful and merciless. Some shouted insults, others spat at him. Then, from the throng, garlands appeared, fashioned from frayed lengths of rope and broken shoes. They swung in wide, mocking arcs before settling heavily around his neck. A donkey, laden with fuel wood, was dragged into the community centre after its young owner was shoved aside roughly. The ringleaders pushed the fuel wood from its back and, grasping the hawker by his shoulders, hoisted him onto it. With a sharp kick to its flank, the confused, braying creature lurched forward, setting the jeering procession in motion. Ikram straddled the beast, shoulders hunched, his neck weighed down by the dangling shoes that swung like desiccated loofah gourds. Boys darted at the edges, pelting the donkey with pebbles, while men struck its hindquarters with sticks, forcing the exhausted creature into a pathetic stumbling trot. Others lashed out at the rider, their blows landing wherever they could. The streets seemed to convulse with noise, and the air thickened into choking clouds of tawny dust. Twice they drove him through every lane and alley of the village, the air pulsing with jeers, whistles and mocking songs. At last, when both man and beast were near collapse, the mob released the donkey and dragged Ikram back to the community centre. His clothes hung in tatters, his face streaked with soot and sweat, his eyes vacant and hollow. For a long while, the congregants argued about Ikram's fate, their voices rising and crashing against one another in the stifling air. Some called for lashes across his bare back. Others howled for his throat to be cut, while a few demanded that his nose be severed entirely. After much clamour and bitter contention, the village court finally settled on the last punishment. Then arose the pressing question, who would cut off his nose? The ringleaders sent for the barber, only to learn he was in a neighbouring village performing a circumcision. Undeterred, they dispatched a runner to the barber's house to borrow a razor from his wife, but she explained that all of his tools had gone with him. A taut, uneasy silence settled over the crowd, broken only by the occasional hushed whisper of speculation as the ringleaders exchanged anxious glances. Rolling up his sleeves, a middle-aged goatherd stepped forward. From his pocket, he drew a small knife. Its blade caught the afternoon sun, flashing a sharp, cold light. The ringleaders held the trembling hawker in place. He bleated like a frightened goat, eyes wide with terror. The air buzzed with anticipation. With meticulous care, the goatherd examined the hawker's nose from every angle, like a butcher inspecting a choice cut, pausing just before slicing, while the crowd froze, every chest locked in a collective, breathless pause. After a brief inspection, He positioned the gleaming blade against the bridge of the nose. A single, fluid motion, and the nose was severed. A sharp gasp surged through the assembly, quickly giving way to a thunderous roar of approval that shook the air. Holding the blood-dripping nose between his thumb and forefinger, the goatherd raised it like a trophy. The crowd cheered, whistled, and clapped in a frenzy of moral victory. He balanced the severed nose on his calloused palm. There it sat, uncannily, like a strange, pale frog poised to leap. With the bloody tip of his knife, he nudged it onto its side, studying the glistening flesh for a silent moment before flicking it into the dust, as casually as one might discard a malignant growth. The spectators leaned in, as if expecting the severed nose to twitch or leap like a lizard's autotomized tail, but it lay motionless, a wedge of ripe pear, denying them this entertainment, drawing grumbling murmurs from the crowd. A shoe nudged it tentatively. A stone flew and struck it. A club thudded near it. Soon, a chaotic barrage of stones, clods, sticks, and brickbats pelted the nose, sending dust swirling into the air and burying it beneath a growing mound of debris. The crowd erupted in savage triumph, shouting, stamping, clapping, and flinging their caps and turbans high into the golden afternoon air. The onlookers had already lost interest in the noseless man, though his agonized screams still tore through the courtyard. Where once a long, proud nose had stood, a small fountain of blood now bubbled, spattering the hawker's clothes crimson. Disoriented and in agony, he lurched to his feet. He pressed his handkerchief to the bleeding stump and took a few tentative steps. The crowd parted lazily, some sneering, some shaking their heads, but no one bothered to stop him. He staggered toward the exit, leaving a streak of blood across the sun-baked earth. "Where are you going?" A voice sliced through the air. "Aren't you taking your snout with you? Gentlemen, return his nose to him. After all, it's his property." Raucous laughter rippled through the crowd, swelling into a brutal chorus of jeers, whistles, and catcalls. "No, we won't do that," declared the village chief, his voice icy and commanding. "Let the dogs have it." "Even dogs wouldn't touch the nose of an adulterer," the amputator replied, a grim smirk twisting his face. The hawker's vision blurred with pain, weakness, and humiliation. The weight of the villager's stares scorched his back as he lurched toward the distant silhouette of his hometown, each step unsteady, each breath ragged with shame.